Welcome to the Just Ingredients podcast. I'm Cara Lynn, and here we talk all things nourishing to the mind, body, and soul. This is a place where you can find just good ingredients to life. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today is going to be a little different than our other episodes, but I think you are going to really love this one. We often focus on the physical issues of the body, but today we are going to focus on one of the body's most underrated tools, the mind. Today we have Rob Dial, host of one of the top self-developmental podcasts. Rob is focused on helping people unlock their potential and break past their limits worldwide. Rob is a mentor, speaker, business coach, blending psychology, neurology, and inspiration to help people create lasting change in their lives. So welcome, Rob, to the show.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it.
I am really excited to have you on the show. Just like the intro said, it's not often that we talk about the mind, and I personally have so many questions. And so
Yeah.
before I start asking you these questions, will you just tell my listeners a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, Zach, I'll tell you kind of everything, and you can ask me any questions you want. I'm complete open book. Usually I say that before we start, but now that we started, I'll just tell you, like, you can ask me any questions you want. But the way I got into this was my past story and how I grew up as a child. So I grew up, and about 9 years old, I realized that my father had a problem, and my father was an alcoholic. And my father's an alcoholic, and he was an alcoholic because of his unhealed trauma from his father's suicide when he was a kid. And
Mm,
so my grandfather ended up killing himself. My dad walked in, saw it when he was 12 years old. My dad never overcame it. He
wow.
became an alcoholic, and by the age of 48, he ended up dying. So when I was 15, he passed away from liver failure. So
Wow.
I was never the type of kid that thought like when my parents got divorced or the things that were happening with my dad were my fault. I had a pretty good idea, at least wise enough, I think, as a child to realize like he's got something inside of him that he hasn't overcome, and that's why he's going with this. And so, we were pretty poor when I was growing up, so I didn't have therapy that I went to. I, never went to a therapist after my father passed away, and we weren't really sure how to deal with it. And then when I was 19 years old, I started in a sales company, and they really pushed self-development. Like, hey, you should read and you should grow and you should hire a coach. And so I hired my first coach when I was 19, about to turn 20 years old. He was a sales coach and a mindset coach, and helped me. And as I started getting deeper and deeper into self-development, I started realizing that I don't want to say fixing myself, but in a way I was starting to heal past traumas. I was looking back at things that happened to me, moments in life, and kind of becoming at peace with them. So that's what happened when I was 19. And then as I grew up in this company, I was promoted to a manager. I was promoted to a district manager. I ran an entire Broward County, which is down in, Fort Lauderdale. And so I had an entire territory, and I would train sales reps. And the main thing I would train sales reps on was what I was working on in my own mind, which was just mindset stuff. And so I was there for about 5 years and trained about 2,000 sales reps by the time I was 24. And when I left, I went into sales again and sales training. And I just like really missed it. Like I felt like the thing I was best at in the world was teaching people the things that really helped me. And so I started the podcast in 2015, and it was, nobody had a podcast in 2015. Like it was really hard to find how to listen to a podcast in
I was gonna
2015.
say,
There
I
was
didn't
no
even know
apps on
what a
your phone.
podcast was in
Yeah.
2015.
No. So it was like I just did it because I felt obligated to teach it. Like I had these things that helped me overcome my traumas, and I just wanted to teach it. So I just started a podcast, and that was 9.5 years ago now. We're at like 1,600 episodes, 350 million downloads. And so it's just grown from there. And so my main thing is like, I just want to teach people how to use the most incredible tool that we have in the entire world that doesn't come with a manual. And I want my podcast to kind of be the manual to help people remove themselves from stress or anxiety or suffering.
Wow. Well, you really are amazing to take
Oh, thank
a
you.
really hard thing in life and turn it to a blessing for others. I mean, so many people fall into like the victim type attitude and, are stuck in this for a long time due to trauma, things like that. So you are incredible to take your hardships and help others with it. So thank
Thank
you
you.
for all that you
Yeah,
do.
I'll even tell you when my dad passed away, I tried to go speak at AA meetings, and they wouldn't let me because I wasn't an alcoholic. But I was like, I want people to see what a child looks like of a father that passes away, and they wouldn't let me. And so,
Wow.
I just for some reason, when I was 15, I was like, "This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, but I'm gonna make this one of the best things that ever happened to me," and that's just the route that I've been on my entire life since.
That is incredible, but that comes because of a mind shift that you took. I mean,
Mhm.
and the mindset that you took of, "I'm gonna do something good with this." And so, I like you said, your podcast is incredible. You've helped millions improve their lives with your podcast, but the whole thing really is the mindset. And so maybe let's just start at the beginning. Why do so many people have a hard time making, like, maybe a mind shift or having a positive mindset?
Well, yeah, this one goes really deep. Well, it's because of people who people think they are, and so like I have my first kid, so I have my son's downstairs. He's 5 months old, and so I've been teaching people for a long time how to change their mindset of themselves based off of the relationship with their parents of how they grew up, right? And everybody's parents are always trying their best, no matter how good they did or how bad they did. And most people, at least people that come to me, are dealing with a lot of stuff like they wish that their parents would have treated them differently. They wish that it would have been different. Some people, their parents, withheld love with them in order to make them do what they wanted to do, or they only gave them love when they achieved, or they didn't give them love, or they neglected them. And so there's many different facets of what happens to somebody throughout the course of their life. And what happens is, like, when I look at my son, like, he's a blank slate. Like, there's no, there's no thought of, like, "Who am I? Is there something wrong with me?"
Yep,
Yesterday when I changed his diaper and it was all over the place, he wasn't like, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry." Like, it's not there yet for him to
yep.
feel like he did something wrong. And so you have to realize, like, every single aspect of who we are is learned at some point in time. Every single aspect of it. And we have to realize that the majority of what we learn is from our parents and or our primary caregivers. And in turn, what happens is because of the fact that most parents don't have a psychology degree and they don't understand like the way that they are, they haven't healed themselves a lot of times. They're usually just passing on the way that they were raised as children. A lot of people are passing on traumas or passing on lack of self worth. They're passing on fears or passing on limiting beliefs and, children are wild. Like, you have to keep them alive. And sometimes they want to jump off of a wall. And so the average child, I saw a statistic in 2009 that kind of changed my whole mindset of it. The average child is reprimanded 8 times more than they're praised, which
Oh,
in
wow.
turn, the only thing that a child cares about is, does my mom love me? Does my dad love me? And a reprimation, like to go and say, hey, I'm going to go at my child and tell him no, or yell at them, or even just like, hey, you shouldn't do that because you're safe, it feels like a retraction of love from their parents. And so what
Mm,
happens is a child starts to think to themselves, well, I need to change this isn't conscious, but it's subconsciously, I need to change myself to be what my mom or dad wants me to be so that they love me as that figure. And so what happens is a lot of people end up becoming somebody that they aren't necessarily, truly are. And then at one point in time, they wake up and they're 35, 40 years old and they're like, who the hell am I? Like, this isn't, I don't feel aligned with my life goal. I don't feel aligned with who I am. Some people are like, I don't feel aligned with who I'm in a relationship with. And it's for some people, like ignorance is bliss. Some people never have this moment of awakening and some people do. And they're like, something's wrong. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And it goes back to the whole thing of like, well, it's at this point in time kind of a rediscovery of who you actually are. Okay. If you say if I'm 38 right now, if I'm 30 and I'm having this moment of awakening, for the past 38 years, I have this identity of this is who I am, this is who Rob Dial is, this is how Rob Dial acts, this is what he believes in. Now I want to wake up at 38 years old and be like, well, who do I want to be from here forward? And it's really hard to change for a lot of people because they literally have to change their identity of who they think they are. Because when you change your identity of who you think you are, naturally your actions are going to start to change as well. So, a lot of people, what makes it really hard for them to get out of that is that they think they are a person. A really great movie that people should watch is a documentary that kind of explains all of this. It doesn't explain all of this, but when you look at it through this lens that I'm about to tell you, it will change your whole perception of the way that you view yourself and everything. But there's a documentary called Jim and Andy, and it's about have you ever seen it before
I
with Jim
haven't.
Carrey? Oh my
No.
god, it's incredible. So it's Jim Carrey goes and plays Andy Kaufman in a movie called Man on the Moon. And Jim and Andy is a documentary behind the scenes of this whole thing. So Jim Carrey played Andy Kaufman, who used to be a person who was alive in the 70s and 80s. I think he passed away in the early 80s. And he was a method actor, so he became him. He never turned him off. So the camera
Mm,
stopped rolling. He was him when he would go home. He would him was him when he would come back. But the crazy part about it though is that It goes so deep where Andy Kaufman used to play other characters. So Andy Kaufman played Tony Clifton, for instance. So if Jim Carrey was playing Andy Kaufman, who was playing Tony Clifton, and the
Mm.
camera stopped that day, he would go home as Tony Clifton. So if his dad called him, he would answer as Tony Clifton. When he woke up in the morning, he was Tony Clifton in the shower, getting dressed. His driver would say that even in the car rides to and from work, he was literally Andy Kaufman or Tony Clifton. Then it goes even crazier and deeper. Andy Kaufman's daughter wanted to resolve around her father's death. So Jim Carrey went to like mini therapy sessions with Andy Kaufman's daughter as Andy Kaufman.
Oh,
So
wow.
he lost himself completely, which if you've seen
Wow.
this huge like spiritual awakening over the past 20 years that Jim Carrey's had, it started with this. And the reason why is because the movie stopped. He said to himself, like, I don't know who the hell Jim Carrey is. I don't know my beliefs. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I dislike. And he thought to himself, like, if I can lose Jim Carrey, then Jim Carrey is just a character that I've been playing my entire life. Just like The Mask, just like Ace Ventura. And if I can lose that, that means that I can just decide from this moment on, like, who do I want to be? And so he lost his identity in this character and then went, well, if I'm at this point, why don't I just decide who I want to be from here forward? And so one of the reasons why people have so much suffering and it's so hard for them to change is because of who they think they are. And like my favorite quote that I'll leave you with around that is Alan Watts, one of my favorite philosophers, says, you're under no obligation to be who you were 5 minutes ago. Like you can just
Mm.
decide to be different today. Just try it on. Like I'm wearing a gray shirt today, right? Just try it on for the day and just see if you like being, if you're a shy person, be more outgoing for the day. And you can start to realize that your identity, which you think is set in stone, is as fluid as anything else. You could be a different person every single day. And if you do that, it really makes you free from who you thought you were.
That is so interesting. Okay, so if people have this belief of who they are, to me, I think those are limiting beliefs. Can we say that a lot of people have these limiting beliefs because of who they think they are from all the past experiences?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I f I find in the workplace that it actually restricts people on what they could become or who they could become, these limiting beliefs. And so, how can a listener who's listening first maybe identify these limiting beliefs and then overcome them?
Yeah. Good question. I mean, so any belief about yourself is a limiting belief. Like I am of the belief myself that we are beyond like what we can even imagine as far as our capacity and our capability and the things that we can do. And to say I am this puts me into a box and automatically into that box means that I can only do what's inside. So like an example I like to give is like I'm in my studio right now. It's probably 13 feet by 13 feet. If you look at this, what could I do in this studio? Well, I could put a bed in here, people could sleep, I could have a couple people over, but it's very limited in 13 by 13 feet. If I go to, the stadium down the road at UT that holds 100,000 people, I have a lot more options of stuff that I could do there. I could have a concert, I could have a get together, we could have cocktail parties, we could have football game, basketball game, soccer games, all of that. The because of the open space and more area, I'm able to do more in that area. So when people say I am shy, I am not good enough. I am not smart enough. It's like putting yourself in this little tiny box that we're in. And like one of my favorite quotes around that is if you put yourself in that box, you're only going to be, and you like work on yourself and you work on yourself and you work on yourself, but you believe like, hey, this is the box that I'm in. Well, then you're only going to become the greatest version of your limited self. And so people have
Mm.
to realize like, what are the things that I say about myself? And most people aren't really aware of their own internal narrative because it's been there for so long. There's a therapist that I had on my podcast a while ago, and she said the majority of people's internal narrative is the exact same narrative, the exact same way that their primary caregiver spoke to them. And so
Mm.
they're taking the way that their parent primary caregiver spoke to them, placing it as their own internal story and thinking that it is reality. And so when you look at that internal story, it's kind of like the story of like the two young fish are swimming through the water and an old fish comes by and he's passing them and he says, "Hey, water's great this morning, right?" And they're like, "What is water?" It's like they've been in it for so long and they have no idea that they're in it. It's like people's internal story is the same where it's like it's been the same for so long that they're not even aware that it's there. They're not even aware that they're putting these limiting beliefs of I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I can't run a business, I'm unlovable. They're not even aware of it. And so what it comes down to is people are so busy. I think a lot of people need to slow down a lot more and start to listen to themselves when they find themselves getting very fearful. Take a step back and just ask yourself, like cognitive behavioral therapy, the question is, what was I just thinking? When I notice a feeling in my body, ask myself, what was I just thinking? Because most of the time we don't notice the thought. And so, like, I remember a few months ago, probably like a year ago at this point, I was on a podcast and I watched they sent me hey, the interview just came out. You should watch it. I watched it like 6 hours after it came out. And I watched it and I was talking about how I had used self development to kind of be like my own therapy because I couldn't afford therapy as a kid. And someone in the comments section was like, I can't believe that this guy says nobody should go to therapy and they should just read books. And I was like, I didn't say that at all. But I looked at it, I saw the comment, went to making eggs in the morning, and about 20 minutes into making eggs, I was like, "Man, I feel really anxious. Why the hell do I feel so anxious?" And I was like, "What was I just thinking?" And I was like, "Okay, well, I was thinking about the eggs, I was thinking about this," and I went back and I was like, "Oh, that person made me feel not good enough," which then made me trigger my own insecurities of, "Damn it, like, I'm trying so hard, I can't believe that this guy completely misinterpreted this thing. I hope nobody else misinterprets this and says, 'Oh, I shouldn't go to therapy, I should just read books.'" And I didn't even realize the thought, I just noticed the feeling. And so I think that we just need to become more aware of, like, taking a step back, not being busy all day, not being on our phones all the time, doing some deep breaths, staring outside for a second, just allow, like, what are my most what are the thoughts that I think more than anything else? What's going on in my head? What's holding me back? And start asking ourselves like questions to kind of get more intuitive with what's going on inside. And I think that's the first step to changing the limiting beliefs is you've got to become aware of them because you can't change anything that you're not aware of.
Well, I love those analogies and love that first step of you've got to become aware of what's going on and what you're thinking and what you're feeling. So once they become aware of it, how do they actually change it? Because let me give you an example. I talked to someone the other day who I suggested, maybe you should do this. And she said, I can't. And I'm like, well, why can't you? And she's like, I just can't do that. And I'm like, sure you can. And she's like, no, I know I can't. And I was like, she just had this belief of wasn't good enough. She would never be able to do that. She couldn't do that. So maybe she was aware of it, but then how do you overcome that or switch your mindset?
Yeah, it's a good question. So think about it this way: like, if I'm now waking up to this at 38 years old, this way that I've been like saying this thing in my head, whatever it might be, I'm not lovable, right? Like some people, it's not lovable. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of that. Well, that's my thought process my entire life. So if I'm going to think that, maybe I should just, and what they call it is they call it challenging the thought, or it's called cognitive reframing. So in cognitive behavioral therapy, it's basically like, okay, this is cognitive reframing, which is I'm on this side of the debate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the other side and I'm going to debate myself now and just see if I can find holes in it. And what you'll find is that no belief is true. There's no actual like real legitimate truth. Like if I opened you up inside, I wouldn't find a tag that said not good enough or not lovable. Right? You weren't born not lovable. It's a belief that you have of yourself. The problem with it though is that a belief is just a thought pattern that you've been thinking for a long time. And because you've been thinking it so much, you believe that it's true, but there is no truth in it. And so what I always like to do is say, okay, no worries. If you want to believe that you're unlovable, believe that you're unlovable, but you have to become aware of the belief and what it's going to do as far as limiting you for your entire life. But just for a second, let's just go to the other side of the room and the other side of the debate table. And what I want you to do is I want you to give me any proof that you can find where you are lovable. Have you ever been in a relationship and someone told you that you love you? Have you, does your mom tell you that she loves you? Does your dad tell you that she loves you? Is there anyone in your family, brother, sister? Oh yeah, do your children tell you that they love you? Because what happens is we tend to focus on just the things that make our story about ourselves true. And so if I can start to poke holes in your story, you realize after a little while, it's like a house of cards. You just need one little flick and the whole thing comes crumbling down. And that's most people's beliefs. And so in cognitive reframing, it's just like, if I'm going to believe one side of the coin and I really want to stay there, well, then I'll at least take myself to the other side of the coin and say, is the other side of the coin true? Is the other side of the debate table, is that true? And what we tend to find is that you're going to find the other side as much as you're going to find the side that you've been on your entire life. And that's kind of the first step to people being able to poke holes in what it is and change their belief pattern. And then what it comes with, and this is, I used to think that affirmations were like really corny, but People are affirming things to themselves all the time. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. That's you affirming something to yourself. And so it's like, okay, if I have found holes in what my truth is, what I thought was truth, quote unquote, then what would be like a phrase that I could say to myself every single day? I could remind myself every single day about how I am lovable. Maybe what I'll do is I'm going to make a list of all of the times when I was lovable. And I'm going to make this list. It might be 5 things, it might be 50 things. I'm going to make myself, anytime I feel unlovable, I'm going to make myself read that. So I'm going to take a picture of it on my phone and put it in my favorites. I'm going to read it every single time because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to change my belief pattern. And so when I notice my belief pattern come up, well, then I'm going to look at what I want my beliefs to be. And if you do this long enough, your beliefs of yourself will actually start to shift and change. And so that's the first step and kind of the second step that I recommend for people to start to change their belief patterns.
I love those steps, but as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking people don't have to have the desire to want to do this. Otherwise, they're just stuck in their old mindset, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to stay the same, they can if they want to. But usually people aren't listening to podcasts unless they want change, right?
That's
So
true.
like the
That is
average
true.
the average person that's out there doesn't want change. Like I remember seeing a cartoon one time and it was a picture of a guy on stage, like a politician, and it said, "Who wants change?" And everybody's hand was up. And then the next one under it was him on stage. It says, "Who wants to change?" And nobody's hand was up. It's like that's how majority of people out in the world are. But if someone's listening to your podcast, someone listening to my podcast, there's a part of them inside that's like, I want change. I don't know how to change. I don't know what I should do to change. And so if somebody has the feeling deep down inside them that they want more, that they want change, or that they want to evolve, they want to be healthier, well, it's going to take different steps to do it. I always say, like, if you're going to say yes to something, you're going to have to say no to something else. Like I looked at your Instagram and there's a lot of stuff on health, and I'm like hardcore on my health too. I have to say no to so much stuff to be healthy, right? Like I've been I've been doing a one meal a day for the past 3 weeks, right? So I don't eat until 5 o'clock. I have to say no all day long because all I want to do is eat up until 5 o'clock, right? So it's like all I'm having is just fasting until then. So it's like if you want change, you're saying yes to something, you're gonna have to say no to something else. If you want to be different and change your belief patterns, you're gonna have, and that is your yes. You're gonna have to say no to some of the things that you used to do, some of the things that you used to believe. But ultimately, that's how change happens. You can't do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. That's insanity.
Okay, so I have a question for you about people stuck in their limiting beliefs. Is that the same thing as victim mentality? Meaning, because I hear a lot of times like, oh, she's stuck in victim mentality, or he just can't, he's stuck from the past with the traumas that he hasn't, resolved traumas from the past. And so he can't take accountability for things because of victim mentality.
Yeah.
Is it the
Yeah.
same sort of thing?
I would I would I would say they can kind of blend, but I think they're kind of, I'll put it this way. A limiting belief is more internal, a victim mindset is more external. And so like a limiting belief is like who I actually believe that I am, going back to like this identity thing of like, I believe this, right? I believe that I'm lazy. I believe that I'm not smart enough. I believe that I'm afraid of failure, all of that. A victim mentality is more like, this is this is happening to me. The world is against me. Everyone in the world is evil, and they're looking at the world through a negative perspective outside. So that's looking externally. A self-limiting belief is more like looking internally with a negative perspective. And like for me, like
Mm.
I'll give you a great example. Like I was one of the most negative people you've ever met in your life. Like I was so good. I was a salesperson. I was so good at finding reasons why I was getting screwed, or I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't smart enough. And I would be late to meetings and I would blame it on somebody else, or I'd blame it on the traffic versus just going, you know what? Victim mentality is not doing anything for my life. And I had a coach that I told you about at the beginning when I hired him when I was 19, about to turn 20 years old. And we worked together every single week. I had an hour-long call for 2 years. And all of them were great, but I could not tell you any of the calls what we covered, but I can tell you one of them. Like I remember one, and it deals specifically with this. And so for me, like I didn't really have a father that showed me how to be a man, how to be successful, how to act in the world, right? I kind of had to look around my, periphery and just find people that were I wanted to look up to, right? I would show up late to calls. He would give me assignments and I wouldn't do the assignments. And it was excuse after excuse after excuse. And he goes, "Hey Rob, can we take a step back for a second? Like I just want to ask you a question, just kind of see if I can change your perspective." I was like, "Sure." And he goes, "Okay, if you have like a company and it's got 1,000 employees, And, there's management, there's all of that. And the company goes and their goal is to do XYZ and they fail at that goal. Whose fault is that? And I was like, well, it's probably the owner's fault. He's like, if we go into a bigger corporation, whose fault is it? And he's like, I was like, the CEO's fault. He's okay. If you have a company that has 1,000 employees and their goal is to do $100 million that year, and somebody gets all of those 1,000 employees to move in the right direction, everybody hits their goals, and the company does over their goal. Whose fault is it? And I was like, well, I guess it's the CEO's fault. He goes, do you want to know your problem? And I go, yeah. He goes, you're not acting like the CEO of your life. And so if you get to the end of your life and it's not what you wanted it to be, and you didn't have the success and the happiness and the love and the peace and the abundance that you want, whose fault is that? I was like, I guess that'd be my fault. He goes, but if you get to the end of your life and you're on your deathbed and you did everything that you wanted, you had the success, the happiness, the money, the fame, whatever it is that you wanted, whose fault is that? I was like, that would be my fault. He goes, the problem is you're not living like the CEO of your life. And if you want to keep blaming
Mm.
everybody, fine. But you're going to hate the end result of your life when you get there if you don't stop blaming other people. And I was like, it like clicked in that was probably the most life changing conversation I ever had in my life. And I was like, okay, I got to stop playing the victim because everything is my
Mm.
fault. I've got to make it my fault. Because otherwise, if I'm the victim, I have no power in my life. But if I'm the person who's like the CEO of my life and acting like I am, it puts me in full control of everything. And so that was the way that I kind of see the difference between, victim mentality and self-limiting beliefs.
I love that so much. I actually am going to pass that on to a lot of people because I feel like I have a lot of people that I deal with who they can't take accountability for anything. It's always everybody else's fault or there's an excuse for everything rather than just owning up to it.
Which was me for the longest time, so I know what that feels like, I know what it's like to blame everybody else.
And so these people that have a hard time accepting accountability or seeing that their decisions in their life are due to what they're deciding rather than it being everybody else's fault. Is the best way you think to maybe help them and teach them about that CEO analogy you just gave? Or are there other steps they can do?
Yeah, I think and it comes down to this, like, if somebody doesn't wanna change, they're not gonna change, like, that's really what it comes down to. And one of the things that really drove me the craziest when I first got into managing people because managing yourself is hard enough. Managing hundreds of people sometimes can be, like, a whole other thing. And I used to hate that there were so many people that would come into my office, and I was a sales trainer, and they had so much potential, and they said they wanted to do these things, they wouldn't do it. It just drove me crazy, and I brought it to my manager one time, and he had been with the company for 13 years. I was like, "Man, I have so many people that just have so much potential, and I want it for them, I want them to improve, and they're just not doing it." And he said, "Well, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink." And that, like, is burned in the back of my head of, I can do everything that I can do to try to help somebody change. But ultimately, somebody's gonna wake up in the morning I'm not gonna be there. They're gonna be in their bed, maybe they're single and they're all alone and their alarm goes off, and they have this moment of, "Am I ready to wake up and change my life, or do I wanna hit the snooze button?" And that's ultimately their decision. I can't force somebody to change their life and force somebody to transform. And, ultimately, all I can do is try to help them see how much better their life could be if they did make a change. Like, you deal with physical health, I deal with mental health. Both of us, if we could literally get people to do exactly what we tell them to do, we both know that their lives would be so much better by doing it, right?
Exactly,
But we
true.
can't force them to do it. And so ultimately, all I try to do is light up the path and say, "Hey, here's what it could look like." Whether they make the decision to actually change their life is fully 100% up to them.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our show sponsor. Get ready to unwrap just ingredients this holiday season. Starting November 26th, you can save up to 25% off site wide. Plus, get a free month supply of probiotic complex with orders over $250. During Black Friday, we'll be launching 10 new products, including 5 new supplements like thyroid support. Designed for anyone wanting a healthy metabolism or managing autoimmune thyroid conditions like Hashimoto's and Graves' disease, and our PMS complex, which can help alleviate menstrual cycle symptoms like cramps, bloating, and hormonal breakouts. And we have new protein flavors, French vanilla, which I know you guys will love because it's what you've been asking for. A vanilla made without cinnamon or stevia leaf, plus a new seasonal flavored chocolate orange. We'll be bringing back other seasonal favorites like eggnog protein, vanilla peppermint protein, and the vanilla peppermint beauty products. Learn more about our new products and get additional sale details by joining our mailing list through the link in the show notes. And get ready to shop starting November 26th. Happy holidays from Just Ingredients. Now back to the show. Okay, so I'm going to sort of shift topics a little bit because something I want to talk to you about is people's confidence. Because I feel like a lot of people struggle with their confidence or their self worth. And so, are there ways that people can shift their mindset to increase their confidence, or what's the best way
Yeah.
to help people with that?
So, yeah, it's there's a thing in psychology, it's called the confidence-competence loop. So, like, confidence is, I believe in myself. Competence is, I have the knowledge and skill set to get it done. And so it's kind of like you sit it and you say, okay, confidence and competence, which one comes first? It's kind of like the chicken or the egg. Does the egg come first? The chicken come first? You don't really know. Do I have confidence first? And that helps me I take action and then I have more competence, or do I have competence first? And really the secret of it is neither one of them. The secret of it is that you just have to take action into the direction that you need to go. One of the things that really is eye opening for a lot of people, because people are like, but Rob, I don't believe in myself. And I always ask, who said that it was a prerequisite to believe in yourself in order to take action? Like, you don't have to believe in yourself at all in order to do the right thing. You've just got to start taking the right action. And as you do it, and one of the biggest pieces of this that I think really helps people with confidence is to do what you say you're going to do, to follow through. Like, there's so many I did a reel on this on Instagram a little while ago, but there's so many different things out there where people say, hey, do cold plunges. Hey, meditate for 45 minutes, do breath work. All of these different things that people can do to improve themselves. All of those are good. But if somebody really wants to improve themselves, decide what you want, say what you're going to do, and then do what you say you're going to do. If you just do that, your life will be infinitely different in a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. If you just do what you say you're going to do and you follow through. And so you look at it and you're like, well, I'm not confident in myself. I'm not competent either. Well, competence is knowledge and skill set. So you can learn more and you can do more, and that will help you with your competence, right? So what do I need to learn? Confidence comes from doing what you say you're going to do and taking action. Confidence as well, though, people think, well, I need to succeed at what I say I'm going to do in order to get there. That's not true at all. The only person that's watching you at every single moment is you. And so as long as you show up and do what you said you're going to do, I like to think of confidence, the way I describe it is I like to think of it as like Jenga blocks, right? If you've seen Jenga and it's stacked up, right? When I say, hey, I'm going to wake up in the morning, and I wake up in the morning when my alarm goes off, as long as my feet hit the floor, it's like getting one little confidence Jenga block, and I build it. And I say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to the gym today. I get one little confidence block and I put it down. And I'm trying to stack these little tiny blocks. It's not about if I succeed. It's not about if I lose the 30 pounds. It's if I do what I say I'm going to do. And if I don't do what I say I'm going to do, it's like pulling away confidence blocks. So when I say I'm going to wake up and I don't, I pull one away. And the example I like to give as well that kind of helps with this is my wife has a friend, and it's kind of a joke between my wife and I, where she says she's going to come over and hang out, and then she cancels the day of. And then she says she's going to come over and hang out, and then she cancels the day of. And it's like clockwork, right? About 1 out of every 5 times she actually does. But because she's done it so much for 7 years at this point, we don't have trust that she's going to show up. Why would we? Because she hasn't given us any examples in the past that she shows up when she says she does, except for 20% of the time. And so we've lost confidence in that because she doesn't do what she says she's going to do. How often do people listening to this and listening to my podcast say they're going to start their workout and they don't work out? Say they're going to start eating healthier and they don't. Say they're going to start waking up and they don't. So if people want to be more confident, you don't have to believe in yourself at all. You don't have to believe that you're going to be healthier. You don't have to believe that you're going to lose weight. You don't have to believe that you're going to be happier. You just have to take the step in the direction of that. And as long as you do, you're going to start to build more confidence in yourself. And when you build more confidence, you'll become more competent. When you become more competent, you become more confident. And then the cycle starts where it kind of becomes momentum on your own side. As long as you show up, you're gonna get the confidence and the competence. And eventually you fast forward a year from now and you're like, oh, I'm a different person than I was. I'm way better. I'm way more confident. I believe in myself more. And so that's the thing that I see about confidence is like the person who's always watching is you. What are you proving to them? That you're trusting or that you're not trusting?
That is so good, but I have a question for you. So you have to show up or take action, which in my mind means you either have to have some discipline in your life or some motivation. I feel like a lot of people will say like, "Yeah, I'm gonna show up. I'm gonna start going to the gym every day." And then they come 2 times and they're done.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the way that I like to talk about discipline, because discipline has a very negative connotation to it, right? Like if your dog doesn't do something it's supposed to do, people say, "Oh, you got to discipline your dog." People say, "Oh, you got to discipline your children when they start acting up," whatever it might be. Discipline has a very negative connotation. But in your realm, like with health, for instance, right? Like health is like the thing that you like love and you teach and you help people with, right? People have to have the discipline to eat healthy, to take care of themselves. And discipline feels like a whip. Like when you think about it, like that's the way I visualize it in my head. Discipline is the ultimate form of self love. It is
Hmm,
the ultimate form of self love
like
because you're
that.
saying to yourself, I love myself so much, I'm not going to eat this trash anymore. I love myself so much that I believe in my future self so much and I want to take care of myself that I'm not going to skip the gym anymore. I'm not going to scroll on Instagram for 2 hours. I love myself so much, I'm going to read a book. And so you don't have to have any discipline to do the things that are bad for you. I don't have to have any discipline to eat an entire pizza. None at all. It's the easiest thing in the world for me. I'll eat an entire pizza. I don't have to any discipline to wake up, or to sleep in the morning. I have to have discipline to do the things that I know that are good for me. And so ultimately what it comes down to is my relationship with myself. I love myself too much not to let myself slip up. And so that's the way I like to look at discipline, which is like, if you want to stay the same. But if you're looking and saying, I want my future to be different, well, I need to love myself enough to have this discipline to take the action I need to make my life better, to make my family's life better, to make my community better, to make the world better. Because ultimately, like I never understood for the longest time, be the change that you want to see in the world. But it's basically saying you're not going to change anybody else in the world. But the way that you start changing the world is by changing yourself first. And if people look at you and they say, oh my gosh, she lost 30 pounds, what did she do? And now they ask you, well, then maybe they'll start to take your what you did and they'll start to change themselves as well. Oh my gosh, you used to have so much anxiety. You were so stressed out all the time. You seem so peaceful. What are you doing? You're doing breath work and meditation. How do you do it? Tell me about it. The way that you change the world is by changing yourself. But in order to change yourself, you have to love yourself so much that you say, I'm not going to allow myself to slip up anymore.
Okay, I love that you say discipline is the ultimate form of self-love, but I know you probably know what question I'm going to ask next. I deal with a ton of people that don't love
That love
themselves.
themselves.
Yeah, right? So, that's a great thing to say, but then how do you help these people love themselves? Because I think that's probably the biggest challenge out there. Well,
Yeah.
okay, not the biggest, one of the biggest.
It's pretty big. It's pretty big. So then I like to shift words to because words hold so much power. So if you can shift somebody's perspective, they can start to see things differently, which ultimately that's what I try to do with words. I try to change people's perspective. So when you take of the phrase like self-love, where someone's like, "Well, I don't love myself more. I need to love myself more. What does it look like to love myself more?" The biggest thing that I have found with people is self-love. A better phrase for that is self-acceptance. So many people are trying to change. I did this for years. Like the first 15 years of self development, I was just trying to change myself because I didn't like aspects of myself. And what I have found, there's a great therapy that people can go through. It's called, they can go to somebody who does this form of therapy. It's called internal family systems. And it sounds like a family working together. It's not. Internal family systems means there's a million different versions of Rob inside of me. I don't need to hate any of them. I don't need to try to get rid of any of them. I need to learn to accept them. And
Hmm.
so as I accept something, like the more that you accept somebody that you're in a relationship with, the deeper that you can love them. The more that you accept your children and like, hey, this one's a little bit crazy. This one, the more that you can love them, right? Not trying to change somebody. Like the ultimate form of loving somebody else, like if we put it external, is to not try to change them into what you want them to be. It's to like, love and accept them as they are and for who they are. And ultimately, it's like a what's the point of a gardener? The point of a gardener is to give the flower the water, the sun, the air, the space that it needs in order for the flower to grow into what its potential could be. It's the exact same way that you're in a relationship with somebody. It's not to change them. It's not to put a mason jar on top of the flower and say, no, I don't want it to grow so tall. It's to say, what is this person's true purpose and how can I help them and love them and accept them so that they can become the best that they can become? Well, it's the exact same thing for us, where it's like, what are the aspects of myself that I'm trying to change that I don't want anymore, that I think are not good enough? And looking at them and saying, I need to just accept them. And this is where it gets kind of weird. And I'll explain this very slowly so everyone can understand. Because a lot of things that are like very like spiritual universal truths are almost paradoxical. So it's like there's this is a truth and this is a truth, right? So if I want to change something, the way that I do it is to not try to change it. And it stops having so much power over me. And I'll explain what I mean by that, right? So one of the things that I used to hate about myself was I was very judgmental.
Mm,
And it'll pop up like, I don't know if anybody listening has ever done this before. You're just having a good day, and then you see someone on the side of the road, and then like a judgmental thought just pops in your head. And I'm like, where the hell did that just come from? Like, I didn't consciously think that, but it just came out. And so for a long time, I was like, I gotta force this out of me. And then I thought to myself, like thinking that I could get rid of it. What I've come to find after 19 years of working on myself is I haven't gotten rid of any of them. None of them. They're not gone. What they do though is as I start to leave space for them and I love them and accept them as they are, they stop popping up as much. And so it's like, is there a bad side of being judgmental? Of course there is. Is there a good side of having judgment? Yeah, there's
mm,
sometimes I need to look at somebody, especially in business, and be like, do I trust this person or are they trying to come and
mm,
do XYZ? Judgment is something that is very necessary. So trying to get rid of judgment doesn't make any sense. It's just going, there's that judgmental side. And if we want to know where it came from Rob when he was a kid who didn't feel like he was good enough, and it was a protection mechanism. All of the things I want to get rid of are all protection mechanisms that came from a child, like when I was a child, right? So being judgmental, judgment does have its use. Some people are very selfish and they're like, I want to stop being so selfish. Okay, that can be bad. But on the other side of it, I deal with a lot of people who are people pleasers because that's who they had to be as a child. For people pleasers, when I'm working with them as adults, they need to be selfish more often. They need to hold more boundaries for themselves. They need more time for themselves. They need to be more selfish. So, are there bad sides of being selfish? Yes. Are there good sides of being selfish? Yes. But when I stop trying to change them and I go, oh, that's just Rob being selfish again. That's just Rob being judgmental again. Guess what happens? It's like they kind of go back down. It's like it's not on stage anymore with the microphone. It's like, no, I'm going to take the microphone away and I'm going to step into who I want to be. And so one of the ways that I help people do is like come up with a strategy. When you notice something that you've like you're too judgmental with people. My strategy was this. When I notice myself being judgmental, I take a deep breath. I remind myself it's a protection mechanism that popped up when I was a child. And then I will look at that person and I will, in my head, say three things that I like about that person. Because ultimately, I want to come from a place of love more than I want to come from a place of judgment. If I'm just trying to fight the judgment, it makes the judgment stronger. But if I go, you know what, I'm going to shift to a place of love and I'm going to find something I love about this person, well, then it makes it a little bit easier. So now that's all external. How do we do it internal? So if someone finds something that they judge about themselves or they hate about themselves, they want to change about themselves, well, like I said with the debate table, go to the other side. If you're judging yourself, oh my God, I noticed that I don't like the way that my butt looks in these jeans. Okay, I was being a little bit rude to myself. Let's take a step back real quick. What are three things that I love about myself? And it takes time, it takes intention to do this. It takes attention to do this. I'm going to look in the mirror and I'm going to say, I'm sorry. I've been judging you too much. I love this about you. I love this about you. I love this about you. And people want it to happen like to change immediately. Change doesn't happen that fast. But as I've been working with people, they'll notice 6 months down the road, their internal voice of that judgment that they hated about themselves doesn't pop up as much as they want to. And what starts popping up? The loving, self-accepting, self-love version of themselves starts to pop up more. And so really what it is just a habit. And we can change those habits by going, and this is the thing, when I said, we can change the habits by not forcing change onto the habit, but just saying, okay, let me just redirect myself. And then that old habit doesn't come up near as much.
Oh my gosh, I love so much of what you said, and I'm just thinking about so many things. So basically, every part of our internal thoughts that we are saying and doing and thinking and are, to me, it sounds like can have a pro and a con, is what you're saying. So, like, what is that movie with the emotions, joy and anxiety and
Inside Out or something like
Inside
that.
Out. Yeah. Okay. So that second one, what you're talking about, maybe this relates. They Anxiety has such a bad connotation out there. Everybody's, full of like, "Oh, have so much anxiety. I've gotta get on this anxiety medication, blah, blah, blah." And it's always a negative connotation, but in that movie, they show, yeah, it anxiety can be a bad thing when there's way too much of it, but you also need some anxiety because that's what helps you not run out in the middle of the street and get hit by a car, It's what keeps you, um, you know, prepared for a test. It makes you anxious that you've got to actually maybe study and be prepared for this test so that so it can be a good and a bad thing. So that's basically what you're saying is every part of us can have a pro and a con to it, correct?
The good things about me, which is also really hard to deal with, is that I can play devil's advocate for anything. So I've always made myself see other side of the coins, right? Like I've always been like, well, if I'm seeing this perspective, can I see that one? I remember being a little kid, being like 10, 11 years old. My aunt used to drive her crazy because she's like, Rob, you always have to be right. I'm like, I'm not always trying to be right. I just want to know what else is out there. Because I would always challenge what people were saying when I was a kid. Because I was like, oh, is this the truth though? But what else is there? And it's the thing that you have to realize is that anxiety, nothing exists in the human mind that doesn't have some sort of benefit at some point in time. And the majority of the things that, like, if someone has too much anxiety, yeah, well, that's when it becomes a problem. If somebody's too happy, they call that manic, right? So it's like, well, I don't know. You have to have some form of like discretion of like, is this good? Is this bad? And so like anxiety is what kept, you might like this phrase of the way I say it, but it's like anxiety is what kept our species alive. And so you have to understand, we come from, depending on what people believe, 5,000 years, 10,000 years, 10 million years of evolution, right? Let's say if we fast forward, if we rewind 100,000 years ago, right? And there's two cavemen walking next to a pond. And one of the cavemen has a little bit more anxiety, a little bit more fearful. And they're like, well, I'm going to move away from this pond a little bit just because I know that I've seen in other ponds, there's this big thing that pops out, this monster that pops out and grabs people. And the other one's like, oh, no big deal. And they're just walking next to the pond, on the edge of the pond. This giant alligator, boom, takes him, kills him, pulls him into the water. Well, the one that lived was the one that has more worry and anxiety than the other ones, right? So we have millions of years, possibly, of our ancestors being the most worried, anxious ones that existed out there. So we are the byproducts of the most anxious cavemen that
Mm,
existed, most likely.
interesting.
So of course it's in our brain. And anxiety back then is really a good thing. I've been camping before and I've heard something in the middle of the woods in the middle of nowhere. That anxiety that brings inside of me kept me safe. If I don't have it, it could be where, oh, what's that noise? I'm going to go see what that noise is, right?
Right.
And so it's like there's good and bad to every single thing that is out there. It's just about how do we use it? I like to see it like a tool in the tool belt. So like if I'm screwing something in the wall, I don't need a hammer. I need a screwdriver. If I need to hammer a nail into the wall, then I need a hammer. So it's like anxiety can come up, and anxiety really helps you out if you're walking in the middle of a dark alley and you hear a noise. That
Yeah.
makes you feel anxious. If you're sitting at your house and you're drinking your morning coffee and you're thinking about your day and you're getting anxious, and it's always happening, it's probably not the best thing. And so it's like, okay, I'm noticing anxiety pop up. And it's about getting really curious about yourself. When people get judgmental about themselves, I prefer to say, hey, why don't you just get curious? Instead of saying, oh my
Mhm.
God, I'm so anxious again. Why am I always so anxious? This blah, blah, blah. And they start to beat themselves up. Take a step back and be like, why do I feel anxious right now? Is there something to fear?
Love that.
Is there a way that I can make myself feel less anxious? And if you get curious instead of judgmental, you can usually start to work your way through things. And so, yeah, I think there's good and bad to everything that exists.
Okay, so as you're talking though, I'm like, is there really good and bad to everything? So here's my one I'm gonna ask you. A lot of these people that we've talked about that I deal with that say they aren't good enough, that they can't do that, what's the pro of that?
Well, so here's the thing that I like to say, like, I went onto your Instagram, you seem like you're religious, right?
I am, yeah.
I'm not God. So, we look at things in very short term. And so we have to understand, like, there's if we fast forward 1,000 years, if we fast forward, like, there's things that have happened in my life where, I was very anxious, I was very fearful, all of that. If I fast forward 10 years, a lot of times I can look back and go, oh, it makes so much sense why I was like that. because I needed to be at that point, or because I needed to figure out how to move myself through it. And so I think one of the problems that a lot of people have, and I've been this way for a very long time, especially as a business owner, is like when I find some problem, I want it fixed 10 minutes ago. But I'm like, ugh, it's not going to be fixed immediately. So it's the same way where it's like, okay, I'm noticing that I am this way. There's and it's really hard because it we've been talking a lot about like being in control, being the person, being the CEO of your life. But I also believe like I've also just got to have faith that things are the way that they are for a reason. There's many things in this world I don't want to be the way that they are. But I've got to have faith that I don't know and I don't understand. And I definitely don't know more than if there was someone who put this entire universe together. I don't know more than that being that put the entire universe together. So there's an aspect of, and once again, everything is kind of paradoxical. There's an aspect of me taking control of my life. There's also an aspect of I don't know, right? Like I
Yeah,
have people that I
true.
really, really love, and I wish that the things I say could be implemented into their life. But maybe it's just not this go round that they're going to do it. Maybe, maybe there's reincarnation. They come back another year, another life, and they're like, hey, I'm actually supposed to be this person. Maybe they get to the end of life, they go to heaven, they're like, damn, I really screwed that up. I don't know. But I trust that I'm in control of things, but I'm also very much not in control of things. And the way that it's been described to me before by a Indian spiritual guru is basically this. The difference between like willpower and fate is willpower is you're on a plane, you can do anything that you want to while you're on the plane. Fate is the plane's going somewhere and you're not driving it. And so that's kind of the way that I see it. It's like I'm in control, but I also know that I'm very much not in control. And so I think, I just have this belief that if a leaf falls outside in the tree that I can see out there, it was supposed to have happened. And it was planned a million years ago for that leaf to fall. And I'm just going to be completely okay with it.
Oh, so good. Okay, so we have talked about discipline, we've talked about confidence, limiting beliefs, we've talked about a lot. I have one other question though for you. Motivation, is that a mindset or do some people just love to be motivated and others don't? Or I mean,
Yeah.
have motivation and others don't?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing that I think like I actually, it's funny because the original name of my podcast before I called it the Mindset Mentor, when I started in 2015, because it came out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, was MWF Motivation. And then I realized I started being labeled as like a motivational speaker. And I was like, I don't want to motivate people. That's not my goal. What I want to do is I want to give people the tools to change their own life. That's all that I want to do. I don't want to motivate them. So the way I like to see it is like motivation is like a spark sometimes. But if somebody's waiting for motivation in order to change their life, they could be waiting for a few days until they go to the gym. They could be waiting for months until making a change. And what's interesting, and there's psychologists have actually studied this, is we think, oh, before I take action, I need to be motivated. Before I go to the gym, I need to be motivated to go to the gym. What psychologists have found is that actually the difference is this. Motivation actually usually follows action, not the other way around. So for
Mm.
me, I'll just be honest with you. I don't ever feel motivated to work out. That's the reason why I have to have my trainer come here 3 times a week, is because when he's here, I have to do it. And what I notice is that every single morning, I'm like, "Oh, God, I gotta do this again." It's the last thing I wanna do. I'm so busy. I've got so many things going on. But by the end of the workout, he's like, "Do you wanna stop or you wanna keep going?" I'm like, "Let's do one more set." Why? Because now my body's got it's got the adrenaline, it's got the endorphins, my blood's pumping, my heart rate is up. I start to feel better. It changes my internal, connectivity between my brain and my head, or I'm sorry, my body and my head. And I'm going, well, I'm here, and I've always heard that you get the most results like your last couple sets. So let's just do one more set. And so most people are like sitting around like, I hope that God breathes on me today and I get motivated. Like it doesn't work that way. It's like what you have to do is you have to decide what it is that you want, and you've got to just and in some ways you've got to just force the first step. And as you start taking the first step, like people underestimate the power of momentum. Once you start getting a little momentum on your side, you want to keep that momentum going, and it feels good to keep it going. And so, the way that I see motivation is like, are there some days when I feel super motivated, but most of the time, what I'm focusing on more than anything else is being consistent. If I can be consistent in what it is that I do, eventually I'm going to quote unquote win, whatever winning means to me, whatever winning means to somebody else. And James Clear has a quote that says, Every action that you take is a vote for the person that you wish to become. And so if you're hitting the snooze button, you're wishing to become that type of person that's the snooze button. If you're the person who says, oh, you know what? I've been so busy today, I'm going to stop by McDonald's, where then you're choosing to be the type of person. You're voting, casting a vote to being the type of person who doesn't really care much about their health. And that's what it comes down to. And so I'm trying to vote for the person I want to become more often than not. And in order to win an election, you don't have to have 100% of votes. You just have to have more than 50% of the votes. And so you don't have to win every single day. You don't have to win every single moment, but you've got to be having more wins than losses. And the other thing that I really love about what he says in the book is if you're trying to create a habit, if you're trying to make an action actually stick, it's okay to miss a day, but don't miss 2 days in a row. Never miss 2 days in a row, because if you miss 2 days in a row, you're now creating a new habit. And so that's the way I see it, is like, I'm not waiting for me to be blessed with the motivation gods. What I'm doing is I'm going, what do I need to do today and how do I need to do it? And one thing that does help people, just a little tip though, to be more motivated is to find your why. And
Mm,
like, why are you doing it? My very first mentor, I told you about the whole conversation with the CEO of your life. Another thing he used to always say to me is, if your why is strong enough, your how will reveal itself. When your why is
mm.
so strong, how you're going to do it, you'll figure it out. Will there be bumps? Will there be roadblocks? Of course. But if your why is so strong, you'll figure out how to get there. And ultimately, like, if people are like, hey, I had a guy, because, talking about health, I'll give you a good example. I was giving a speech one time, and a guy came up to me and he's like, Rob, I've been trying to lose weight for a really long time. I was like, okay. I was like, so how much weight do you need to lose? He's like, I'm like 75 pounds overweight. I was like, okay, cool. Why haven't you been able to do it? Well, every time I wake up and I want to lose weight and I want to eat healthier, I can't really do it. And I choose the other thing instead. And I said, I know you just met me, but can I just like ask you a really personal question? What's your biggest fear that if you don't lose weight, what's going to happen? And he told me like, oh, I'm afraid I won't be healthy. I won't be able to hang out with your children, my grandchildren. I was like, what's the biggest fear? Like, what scares the hell out of you? And he's like, what I think scares the hell out of me is that I won't make it to my daughter's wedding. And I was like, okay, go with me on a journey real quick. If your daughter, let's say that you don't change your life, you don't start eating healthy, you don't start, taking care of yourself. Let's say that we fast forward 10 years and your daughter's at her wedding. And I want you to visualize thinking it's your daughter's walking down the wedding, at her wedding, she's walking down the aisle and you're not there. So she's walking by herself. And as she looks forward and she can see on the left side, because usually that's where the bride is, on the left side, on that corner, there's your suit that's folded up to
Mm,
hold your space because you didn't change. What would that feel like? And he's like, that would be the most terrifying thing. Like, that's the worst thing in the world that could happen to me,
mhm.
is to not be there for my daughter when she walks herself down the aisle. And I said, okay, you have the choice. You can keep eating the way that you want to. You can not take care of yourself if you don't want to. And you could have a heart attack. You could die. I don't know. Or maybe you could be there. But I know, and you know, that if you do take the right action, you do change yourself, you're more than likely going to be there to walk her down the aisle. And so we had this whole conversation. He sends me an email like 6 months later. The guy lost like 40 pounds. He had never been able to get himself to do it because he was thinking about himself the whole time. Versus what's his why? I want to be able to walk my daughter down the aisle. And so when the why is strong enough, how he loses the weight, how he takes care of himself, the decisions that change his life will eventually happen when the why is strong enough. Eventually be able to figure out the how. And so ultimately, that's what it comes down to, I think, for people, is like, you've got to have the reason why you want to do it. And if you take it yourself out of it, you bring your family into it, you bring your children into it, you bring, your mom and dad into it, whatever it is, and you start wanting to help other people with your actions or be there for other people, that's usually the moment when you actually start to make changes, because you're doing it for other people, not just yourself.
I love that so much, and I love that you shared that, and to me, it really does come down to the why because, like you said, to have more confidence and self-worth and, loving yourself and not have these such limiting beliefs, they all take action. But if we don't have a why, then we don't wanna make take those action steps. And so I believe people do need to find out their why, and why I'm so passionate about help or health and helping others is because of the health crises I went through, and I don't want my kids to have to experience what I went through. And so my why drives me, oh my gosh, I almost wanna cry. My why drives me on a daily basis to, help teach them and help teach others that you can live a happy life. It doesn't have to be a life of depression and unhealthiness and no energy. And darkness. And so my why is, kids, I don't want you to live what I had to go through. So I want you to do better and know better. And so thank you for sharing that about the why,
Yeah,
because
you
it
can
is
you can
huge.
usually find somebody's you found somebody's why when you can start to see it in their eyes. When it
Oh,
starts to
I
tear
love
up,
that.
it's like that's the thing that's driving you, and that's what's made you have so much success is that you just from an internal place know what it feels like, and this is for me. Yours was with health, mine was with my mind. I know what it feels like to feel absolutely in the darkest places, and I don't want other people to feel it. I was able to get myself out of it, and I'm like, I feel obligated to teach this to other people.
Yep.
And
Yep.
when you're driven by that, when you're driven by wanting to help other people, that's when usually you'll start to work harder. Is because you're not just doing it for yourself anymore, you're doing it for others.
Yeah. So true. I have so thoroughly enjoyed talking to you today
Yeah,
and
me too.
learning from you. I literally could talk to you for another hour so easily because I have about 10,000 more questions to ask you,
Well,
but
let's just do it again in the future.
we should. I would love that. And I know my listeners would love that. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Tell though my listeners where they can find you because I know they probably have 10,000 more questions as well.
Well, my podcast is if obviously they're podcast listeners, so if they want to translate and listen to mine, it's called the Mindset Mentor. I put out episodes 4 times a week, usually about 15 to 20 minutes, around a lot of stuff that we talked about: psychology, neurology, why we are the way that we are, early childhood development, our relationship with our parents. And then any platform that somebody's on, they type in the name Rob Dial, I'm going to pop up. I'm on all of them. So whatever they prefer to consume their content on, they type in Mindset Mentor or Rob Dial, they'll probably find me on there.
That's awesome. So many places to find him. But also, don't you have a new book coming up?
I actually had it come out, and it's funny because you asked me. It's called Level Up, and so it's how to get focused, stop procrastinating, and upgrade your life. And so it's funny because the thing that you said is about taking action, right? My entire book, when I was sitting back and writing it, I was like, how, like, what do I do? It's 1,500 episodes, 1,600 episodes. What do I do? And I was like, I basically teach people how to get past themselves to take action to change your life. And so the book is split up into 3 parts: why you don't take action, how to take action, and then how to take your action and turn it into habits through neuroplasticity. So, yeah, it's called Level Up, and it's out wherever anybody wants to buy the book. It's on Amazon, all of that stuff. It's on audiobook. I'm the person who speaks on the audiobook as well, so it's everywhere.
Oh, I love that. I love the topic of neuroplasticity, so I'll for sure go read that. But you saying that, I'm like, dang, we didn't even talk about procrastination. We didn't even
Oh
talk
yeah,
about neural pathways. We didn't talk about any
yeah.
of that. So
People got a lot of things they got to deal with, so we could talk forever.
yes, that is true. Well, thank you again for being here. I always end my podcast episodes by asking my guests what they have found to be the best ingredient in life. What would
Mhm.
you say it is?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the thing that I said earlier, which I think self-acceptance is probably the best ingredient. If people always ask myself, ask me like, if I accept myself, then I don't want to change anything. I won't make my life better. And I'm like, no, you'll still want to make your life better. I don't even like to use the word better. I like to, because better implies worse, which means that I am now worse. If I want to be better, that means that I'm worse right now. I like to say evolve, like another evolution of who I am. You will continue to evolve no matter what, and continue to work on yourself and want to quote unquote get better. But it's a lot easier when you come from a place of like self-acceptance and self-love versus like self-hate and wanting. For a long time I hated certain aspects of myself, and that's why I wanted to change. And becomes really stressful if you do that for years. It's like white knuckling your way through life versus being like, you know what? I love myself. I accept myself. I'm improving every day. Coming from that place is more like a, okay. Yeah, we're going to keep evolving, Rob. And you are who you are. I love you as you are. I accept you as you are, but we're going to keep changing and evolving. And so I think that if people can just come from a place of like self acceptance, it might be hard at first, but as you start to crack that door, you can get a little bit more open, a little bit more open. And self acceptance, I think, is the easier state to come from while you're trying to evolve yourself,
Oh, I love that so much. It's like having a little grace with yourself as you're trying to become better every day.
for sure.
Well, thank you again so much for being here. Listeners, go give him a follow, go listen to his podcast because I sure am. And I know you guys will all learn a ton by following him. So thank you again, Rob, for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Remember to subscribe to the Just Ingredients podcast to learn more about your health and good ingredients to life. Plus, get daily tips at just.ingredients on Instagram.